Hi, and welcome to the vlog. I am trying to make myself be more consistent with this and update more frequently so I don't have as much to talk about in one go. That means you get an at my desk update, and you may or may not be able to hear thunder in the background. There is some really intense, like multiple flashes of lightning and then really loud thunder. I don't know what that's about because it's not raining. It's very humid out, but it's not raining. So I have decided I'm going to update whenever I finish a book, and cue the thunder. I finished a book, The Obelisk Gate. I thought about trying to read this, not last week, but the week before when I read those 3 other books that were 5 stars because I knew I would love it. But I also thought I don't want to overdose basically on brilliant fantasy, and I didn't want anything to get in the way of my consumption of this piece of literature. This is book 2 in the Broken Earth trilogy. It still continues with that second person point of view. I don't mind it. And it actually, there are a couple interludes prior to this. The only interludes in fantasy books that I read were from the Stormlight Archive. But there are, I think, 2 interludes in here where it's just the first person, where the person narrating the second person sections basically reveals that there is a person narrating those second person sections. So it's told in first person, but the narrator still uses second person. They are still talking to Essun. I found that fascinating. And the way that the world evolves in this book blows my mind. I still cannot wrap my head around everything that Jemison is putting into this works. I don't know how she does it. Having read The City We Became duology, and now this one, and the way that she does it, I would love to have that sort of creativity and ability to world build. It's unmatched. This book is different than the first book in the trilogy, because the first book in the trilogy has 3 perspectives that you're following that you know are at different times. This book, because of events and things, how things unfolded, how the narrative unfolded in the first book, doesn't have that setup. It does still have second person. It has a lot more second person in this one than in the first book. But you also have another perspective thrown in, and that's the perspective that actually gets the epilogue chapter. And what that character does right at the end, and the last line that she gives this book, I have no words. She leaves me speechless. This is a fantastic, phenomenal, amazing book. Obviously, from the way that I'm talking about it, no, I haven't put it through Compile, but I know even without that, this is another 5 stars. After a month where I got 0 5 stars, this is my 5th 5 star of this month. Let's just say my ratings for September are going to be a lot higher than in August. Now to chill for the evening. Okay, so I'm coming to you many, many days later from that last update, and you'll notice from the title of this vlog, this is no longer a weekly recent reads, it's now my wrap up, because I finished The Obelisk Gate on the 24th, which was a Tuesday, I believe. You are currently balanced on a pillow, hence why I'm trying to readjust the angle. That was a Tuesday. I picked up, or I had been reading another book, which I'll talk about in just a second. Finished that, wasn't gonna update on that particular day because I had a longer run, it was later in the evening. That was Thursday. Well, we had this little thing called Hurricane Helene come through. And my area, which we're in the upstate of South Carolina, and by the time hurricanes usually get to us, yes, sometimes we get winds, maybe gusts up to 40 miles an hour. That can be damaging. Some people, maybe even several thousand, are out of power, etc. This was something I have never seen before. And we're not even in the worst hit parts, like Western North Carolina, where the Lake Lurie Dam overtopped, caused huge, enormous devastation. Power went out around 7 in the morning on Friday. I'm at my mom and stepdad's house. Their power just came back on this morning. around 10, and it is now Tuesday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, so 4.5 days with no power here. My house still has no power. The Duke Energy Company says Friday evening, potentially. They hope to have everybody's back on. I'm updating on a Tuesday, kind of in the middle of the day at my mom and stepdad's house. Yeah, school has been canceled for the entire week. Yeah, not even doing e-learning, which obviously if 97% of my region is without power and internet, we still don't have internet service, but we have a hotspot, which is fantastic. Anyway, this is going to be a slightly longer than normal wrap up. I was going to do some sort of opening. Maybe I'll still have that opening in there, this opening in there, and then go back to my Obelisk Gate recap review. I think that's what I'll do. I'm going to talk about the books that I finished in the last few days. I managed, to squeak out passing all of my classes. That doesn't mean I read just those books. I read several others, but some of the ones I didn't get to until like the very last day. Okay, so the last book that I finished before Helene made her appearance is an arc that I had, Fire Nuzad and the Ring of Fate. This fulfills the prompt of published in my birth months. I just, birth month, I was born in 1 month. I just default to looking at the arcs because I don't feel like searching those things up. So this plays on Middle Eastern mythology, has jinn in it, and the main character, Farah, she discovers that her absentee dad who visits her once a day is not actually human. He's actually a jinn. When she makes a wish that sort of like upends the entire world, like both worlds, human, jinn, etc. And I thought this was a really well done middle grade novel. I liked how Zargapur explored the identity. She said it was very personal. It was based on some of her life because her parents split when she was young. Zargapur definitely analyzes that in this book and how Farah has to deal with that. So I thought that was really good. The next book that I picked up, I ended up DNFing. Not because it was bad. I didn't actually get that far into it. And it was for one of my obligation reads. G from Book Roast has this new thing where you can like purchase different scrolls with your guild reputation points. One of those is that you can like DNF and still count it. And so I'm purchasing one of those. This book is The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa. This was to fill a required prompt, a vampire book. I'm not a huge vampire, I almost said vampire lover. Vampires aren't really my thing. And this book was written in the early 2010s, and it definitely read like it was written in that time. And that's just not my vibe anymore. I was reading the first part of it. It's this post-apocalyptic tech world where now the vampires rule, and the main character is trying to survive, not be registered, not have to give her blood to the vampire overlords, ends up getting turned into a vampire. That's all in the synopsis. I read 97 pages and I just I don't want to read this. This is not the book for me. So I'm going to purchase that scroll, DNFing, and going to unhaul the book. I like Julie Kagawa's work, so I know that the writing would have been good. It just wasn't the book for me. The next book that I read, and this one was an audiobook, I read Sense and Second Degree Murder. This was for an optional prompt. I forget which one that is, but it does help me finish a series. So I finished I think it's the Jane Austen mysteries, and I think I've read all 3 of those this year. This is definitely based on Sense and Sensibility, which is one of my favorite Jane Austen novels. I really like the twist that Tirzah Price had on the different characters, on the Willoughby character. I think I would have liked a little bit more from I can't remember his name, the character played by Alan Rickman in the movie. Maybe it's because he's one of my favorite male leads in a movie. In that movie, he's one of my favorite overall. So maybe that's why his character, Colonel Brandon, that's it. He wasn't a colonel in this, and she also aged down several of the characters because Colonel Brandon is supposed to be an older gentleman in Sense and Sensibility, but in this, he's only like a couple years older than Marianne. But I really enjoyed this one, and I think I enjoyed it more than Pride and Prejudice because I think the setup of this one lent it more towards a murder mystery than Pride and Prejudice did. And Manslaughter Park, I didn't know that one as well. So I think my favorite out of this series is Sense and Sensibility. That leads me to one that I read in a day just because it's a novella, and that is The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. I also forget which prompt I put this one in, and I really enjoy and appreciate Kelly Barnhill's writing. This is a fascinating, very intriguing, perplexing sort of magical realism type novel. In this, the main character, I don't think we ever get her name. I tried to look it up and I don't remember it. It's told through her point of view. And she's 15 during the course of this novella. Has a younger brother who's 6 years old. Mom is a single mom. Dad died early on. And she ends up bringing home this guy who turns out to be a crane. And it's a retelling of the crane wife myth, which is referenced in the book. And it's very hard-hitting. And the allegory to domestic violence TV that Kelly Barnhill is making in this is very open, very broad. There's no hiding what she's talking about in this. And it was, I think, fascinating. She has a really intriguing way of telling the story. I think not all readers would appreciate it because it's not straightforward. It plays into the idea of, because the man is a crane and he has very bird-like things, and we're just supposed to accept that as normal, but it's allegorical. It's hard to describe, but I thought it was very thought-provoking, and so I definitely appreciated it. I don't have any ratings for these, obviously, because I do not have a laptop. I have a desktop, so I did not bring that with me. And because we haven't had power, I haven't been using my mom's laptop because she needs that for her own stuff. Anyway, all that being said, 2 more books to go. I have decided, and you'll see this in my October TBR video, which is going up way into October, even though I already had a plan, but obviously couldn't film it, and I'm at this house without my other books. So I'm not going to film the TBR until I get back to my house. But my plan is to read through a lot of my older series and also my arcs that I have on NetGalley and or through Libro FM. In that case, I read the next arc that I had available to me, which was published back in May. I am trying to catch up. And it's the Supernatural Files of C.J. Delaney. This is so CJ she wants to be a reporter. She wants to be able to do all this investigating and write up these scoops. And so she's working for the paper in this small town that's run by her aunt. It turns out that there are some supernatural things going on. And I'm having to pause and think about this because I've read another arc, but that will count. I think I'll talk about it in this one. I think that was the last book that I finished, and that's The Last Rewitch. So there's some similarities there. So I'm going to have to separate those. This is a very short book, 240 pages, but the way that she's getting into the different investigating, I appreciated. I really wish that I had filmed updates more periodically, even though, it didn't have power or whatever. I don't need that for this. I just have the battery life here because I didn't bring my extra battery. Anyway, I did appreciate that. The last required read that I had, that I finished on the 30th, yesterday, is The Phoenix Keeper. And The Phoenix Keeper is a newer, technically a romantasy, but it's more cozy fantasy because it's definitely not, the romance is not the main plot in this. But I loved this so much. So I'm so excited because the book is phenomenal. In this, the main character, Ayla, is a zookeeper at a magical zoo. So immediately I had all kinds of throwbacks and flashbacks and good vibes from Dinosaur Sanctuary. But all these magical animals, and her niche is phoenixes. And she's trying to restart the breeding program, and that is her driving thing throughout the whole story. Does there end up being a romance? Yes, but it doesn't really develop until much later in the story, and the whole conceit of the story seems to be just this day-to-day task of trying to restart this long defunct, 10 years defunct breeding program to help these animals to deal with coming into her own as a fairly shy, introverted, loves animal, not people so much kind of person, making sure that her animals are kept safe and they can breed and help the survival of their species, even in the face of possible poachers, theft of the eggs, and etc. I loved it. I thought it was so wholesome and really enjoyable. And so the last book, I'm looking at my reading journal, the last book that I read was the last Rewitch, which was something that I got automatically because I'm auto approved for Disney publishers on NetGalley. And this was good, but for too long, I think it straddled the line of, is this just a normal summer camp novel? Because dealing with the whole friendship aspect on there, but also like straddling that line, and also, oh, she's actually a witch and there's this supernatural part of it, and the villain ends up being this supernatural creature. But that whole will they won't they between these two sides lasted really long, for like the first 20-30% of the book, and it sort of was iffy for me, so just trying to figure that out. And so ultimately I wish it had leaned more one way or the other from the very beginning, because it didn't even at the very beginning introduce the idea that there's something paranormal for like 10-15% of the book, even though she thinks she's hallucinating in the opening scene and seeing a witch. But it didn't really lean into that. It was more the idea of camp and her struggles with uncontrollable rhyming and making new friends, dealing with a long lost friend, etc. So it didn't lean into the paranormal side for quite a long time. It sort of threw me off a bit. But overall, I did enjoy it and think this would be something that I might get for my classroom to recommend for my kids. So that brings me up to date with September reads, with reviews of them, I should say. Okay, so I'm back with a familiar environment, with a familiar dehumidifier running. There's probably a lot of moisture around here. I was going to come back home, finally film my September wrap up. I still don't have internet, which makes pulling my stats next to impossible, because for some reason I live in a dead zone for Verizon. So with my internet is out, I can't really use my cell phone data, which I should have unlimited of, because it doesn't work. It won't access it in my house. Literally using it all weekend. Went to Chattanooga. I almost said Gatlinburg. No, Chattanooga. Both in Tennessee. I'll talk about that in a second. We're driving back. Literally, as we pull in my driveway, my YouTube stops playing on my phone. So yes, I live in a dead zone. It's a conspiracy. No, it's not. I don't get into conspiracies, but because of that, and because it's already a full week into October, and I just don't feel like trying to pull all of the data. I did get everything entered and updated. I took advantage of having internet while I was in Chattanooga, but I really don't feel like it. So instead, I'm going to combine my wrap up for last week, which I filmed at my mom and stepdad's, with the other stuff that I read into October. So it was like the last bit of September, first bit of October, and I'll just do one video. Do I have my normal number of videos? No. Do a lot of people care? No. Is it understandable given the power and internet situation? Yes. Speaking of Chattanooga, my mom and stepdad were going to a conference, a counseling conference through our church, and so I knew that we'd gotten power back here at my house Wednesday night. They were packing up Thursday, so I decided I'm just going to pack up and I'm going to come back. And it's probably not on, but maybe I can use my hotspot for my phone. Came home, well, went to the grocery store first, got a bunch of stuff, cleaned out the fridge and the freezer, had melted bananas. That happens when you have frozen bananas and then they have congealed together. They were in there way too long. I should have gotten rid of them a long time ago. And then the power comes back on Wednesday, and then they refreeze, and so everything is stuck to everything in the freezer. I think I still need to clean that out, but my mom might have cleaned it. So I'll have to really thank her for that. I wasn't getting internet, and I was just texting with my mom, and I was just like, hey, I might go to the beach just to get internet. And she's like, why don't you come with us? And I was like, oh, okay. Is that okay? And so packed in about 10-15 minutes and went with them to Chattanooga. Is there anything special about Chattanooga? I mean, it's nice, quaint city. Was I there to visit? No, I was there for the internet at the hotel, which was great. Loved having that. And I've decided every time I go to a new city, I want to find out bookstores, local independent bookstores, etc., staples of that area. And at first, I thought I would go to McKay's. That was a bit out, and we didn't drive in individual vehicles. We all took the church van. So I didn't have a vehicle to drive out to McKay's. But then, as I was looking, I saw this cute little bookshop, and then I realized I'd seen this bookshop before. I used to watch Alexandra Roseland. This is a bookshop that she loved, gushed about, was her local bookshop, and I'm like, I gotta go there. I discovered it was only 2.5 miles from the hotel, and I decided to make an excursion of it, and I walked over there. And this favorite bookstore, hands down, I love this place. So cozy, so quaint, so adorable. Like, the whole bookstore just gives awesome vibes. I did get a tote, but it's still in my bag over there because I haven't unpacked yet. And their tagline is read books, stay curious. Love it. So of course, did I buy some books? And did I put them in my backpack, which is a great Osprey bag, not sponsored, obviously, but anyway, and carry them back and walk back? Yes, it was so cool on the walk over there because I didn't listen to anything either, and I just took in all the sights, saw lots of cool stuff, and then got lots of awesome books. One of them I've read already. We start off with another edition of The Hobbit. Do I need another edition of The Hobbit? No. Did I know automatically that I was going to get this edition of The Hobbit? Of course. I mean, I have Bag End now permanently on my arm. And then I got 3 nonfictions and 1 middle grade fantasy. I wanted to focus on nonfiction because I'm wanting to get more of those and explore more and learn more, and I just felt motivated, and I found some amazing ones. First off, this is the one that I've read already, and that is By the Fire We Carry by Rebecca Nagle. This is very recently published. September 10th is when this came out. Rebecca Nagle is an award-winning podcast journalist. She's put out a podcast called This Land. I've listened to both seasons of it, and they're phenomenal. And this tells a very similar, like, related story to what she covered in the podcast, and it is so good. It is so well written, highly impactful. This is definitely going to get 5 stars for me. I haven't put this one through Cowpile yet because I just finished it yesterday, and it's the generations-long fight for justice on native land. And the way she weaves together the current case, the history of that case leading up to the Supreme Court decision, what happened afterwards, that was very influential on the rights of the Muskogee people to their land in Oklahoma. Not their original land, obviously, the land that they were forced to through the Indian Removal Act. She balances that with the history of that time period. So yes, I know that history a bit, especially because it's so intertwined with the Cherokees as well. And when I was doing my master's degree and I took American Constitutional History, we had to choose a case to study and write our paper on, and I wrote Worcester versus Georgia. That's the case I chose, and that is the case that went up to the Supreme Court that was challenging the Indian Removal Act, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokees. Andrew Jackson decided, I don't care, I'm going to get rid of them anyway, and never enforced it. I knew I was going to love this book when in the prologue, she writes this. So she's talking about, she went and visited the home of Andrew Jackson. I nervously guided myself to Andrew Jackson's grave. Our 7th president is buried behind a black wrought iron fence in a neatly kept English garden on grounds that betray their former life as a plantation. Staff and period clothing milled about. I waited until I thought no one was looking, and then I spat on his grave. As soon as I read that, it's the very first paragraph, I went, yeah, I'm going to love this book. So there's that one. It turned in also into my reviews, so I won't talk about my review in this section. I mean, when I go over the other books that I've read. But anyway, the other nonfiction that I got is actually related to, and I didn't even realize it. Like, I realized it a little bit, but how closely they're related, I didn't realize it. And it's called We Refuse to Forget, a true story of Black Creek's American identity and power. So one thing that the quote-unquote civilized tribes, the Muskogee, the Cherokee, the Seminole, the Chickasaw, and the Choctaw, they were called the 5 civilized tribes for they're adopting more Western habits, did them very little good. And one of those was adopting chattel slavery. And so there were many members of these tribes that were former slaves, but they became part of the tribes. And that's what it's talking about here. And it talks about Creeks, which is the English version of Muskogee. So it's the same tribes talked about in both books. So I'm really intrigued to get to this one. This next one is one that I have an advanced listing copy of, but it's not advanced anymore because the book has come out and my mom has read it and absolutely loved it. And I can't wait to read it. And that's called A Little Less Broken: How an Autism Diagnosis Finally Made Me Whole. So I'm really intrigued to get to this memoir. And then the last one I got, I had to get because I want to continue and keep up with the series. And that's book 3 in the Amari series, Amari and the Despicable Wonders. So I probably will get to that this month. And so I'll take a little bit of time because I'm not going to do a TBR either. It really makes no sense for me to do a TBR at this point because we're so far into the month and I've already been reading. And also, I just don't have a lot of set books that I'm getting to. I do have some that I've already set out that are over on that table over there, which I could go get, but I'm not going to. I am participating in Fablin, which is a readathon put on by Margaret at the Word Nerd. It's very much D&D style, and I'm really liking it. It's similar to the Amazing Readathon, but maybe not as much stress, and like prompts are released as you go. But you can make a character first, and so I watched her sprints where they were like rolling for stuff, and I played along, and my character is a halfling, meaning I get extra points for any children's books, so I'm prioritizing my middle grade and my young adult. And so children was anything that's like not adult. So I'm prioritizing those. I believe, I'll have to double check, but I believe my occupation is a healer. And so there are certain words where you get bonus points if that word or a version of them are in the title. I don't have that list memorized. And then my weapon is a dagger, and that is reading sequels. So I'm going to try to prioritize sequels. It's very helpful for me. Of what I've read so far, I just finished one on the way home today that helps me finish a series. Obviously it's a sequel and it's a young adult, so I get a couple of bonus points there. I'm also, I can't remember the exact name of my guild, but that one is like you get bonus points if it's like a mostly yellow cover. I'm not worried about that at all. That's what I'm prioritizing. I realized I'm a little bit behind on my 24 and 24, so I did pull out 3 of those, 3 that are young adult, and I've read one of them already. I'm gonna make sure to prioritize the other ones. And I also have Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. That's book 2 in, I don't remember what the series is called. But anyway, that's a sequel. It helps with a series that I've already had previously on my, but prior to watching BookTube. Wow, my brain is not working again. Anyway, I've got a few set out over on the table over there. I'll go grab them if I feel like it. I do plan to get to most of those, but I'm prioritizing sequels, young adult, middle grade. That's basically my TBR. Oh, and I also realized that I read The Crane Husband last month, but that was the buzzword for this month. And I didn't read the one for last month, which was, I think, like sense words. And so I actually just started reading that one, and that's I Saw Death Coming, and that's a nonfiction. So I'm doing pretty well on the nonfiction goal. I've already read one nonfiction, working on a second one, probably going to get to more this month as well as I come across them. So there is one other, oh no, I've read 3 of them. So there's one arc. So I'm also choosing between my arcs. So basically I have a whole bunch of arcs and I want to try to get caught up on that. And I've read a handful of those. I talked about those in the first half of this video. The other one that I read in October, I don't remember which one that is, and I'm not going to go try to look it up. Oh, it was Samira's Worst Best Summer, and it was so good. I really liked that one. I've liked both books that I've read by, I think her first name is Nina Hamza. It's a very realistic coming of age, like summer-ish type story that takes place over 2 weeks. She's dealing with a very toxic former friendship, trying to find a new friendship, her parents and her older sister being gone for the 2 weeks, having to do with something in India. it just all together is a very wholesome, well put together book. Okay, so the first book that I read this month was To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods. And there has been a lot of controversy about this book. A lot of people were calling it a colonizer romance. This author also got caught up in the review bombing from the beginning of this year by an author who went completely off the rails. And so there's a lot of drama with it. I was hoping that I would like this book, but unfortunately there was just enough with it that it ended up with a 3.5 stars. It was fine. The main character does not really have a backbone. It's a very hard to grasp world. I didn't figure out until later what actually was going on. So you have a very East Asian type setting. My guess is a fantastical take on China. And you have colonizers who are coming in and they call themselves Roman. That was something that really drove me nuts historically, because I knew this was not like actual Earth, and yet we're calling them Romans, and we're making references back to actual events in Roman history. So I was very confused as to what was going on here. Turns out, and I may have missed it early on, I may not have, but it turns out there's some sort of portal that brought these people in from another world, from our world, and their world is basically dying. And so that's why they need to come in and take over, and they're stylizing themselves as Romans. But I didn't really figure that out until much later in the book, and it just drove me bonkers. And it kept pulling me out of the narrative because I was trying to figure it out. That may be a fault on my part for not catching that earlier, but it also could be problems with her world building. The main character also does not have much of a backbone, and I really don't see, or not much of a backbone, more like character consistency, because she's set up, she has this death power basically, so she should be all powerful. She doesn't want to use it. She doesn't want to become evil. I get that. She's sort of blackmailed into it by the eventual sort of love interest. I didn't really get that early on. Not that he would be the love interest. I didn't pick up on those vibes. And he's a prince. He's a Roman prince. He's able to very easily hoodwink her. The stuff that she starts believing in towards the end, it does not seem believable for me that she went from vehemently hating these oppressors and living out all these ideals to, even though she's being blackmailed and manipulated, doing what she did towards the end of the book. And I can see why people say that it's a colonizer romance. I don't think it is, because you always know there's something wrong with this guy. There's something unbelievable about this guy. If she had come to the end of the book and not done what she did with some of the reveals there, then you could probably say it's a colonizer romance. I don't think it is. But I also have no interest in picking up the sequel. It just was a very meh book for me, and I just kept getting pulled out of the story so many times, unfortunately. Another one that I'm very sad about, because I'm going to be unhauling this one as well, and it's another Illumicrate book, is Goddess of the River. I was so excited for this book. I really enjoyed Kakei. I think I read it not last year, but at the end of the year before, because it was on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. This one was fine. It was very well written. Still had the same writing style and tone, and you can tell that Vaishnavi Patel meticulously researches her work. So well done. It's just the sort of style of sweeping mythological epic that just doesn't do it for me. I've discovered that. I've realized that with Greek mythology, and it doesn't work for me with a different kind of mythology either. It just, for me, spanned way too much time. And unfortunately, some of the timelines did seem a little confused in here. I eventually was able to figure it out, which is great. But at first I was confused as to what was going on, because I thought the whole thing was going to be about Ganga. So Goddess of the river Ganges, or Ganga, the goddess, is supposed to be the main character in here. It takes on the trend of what a lot of Greek mythology is doing, only it's doing it with Hindu mythology. So unfortunately, this was a miss. It was a 3.5 stars. It's gorgeous, but I'm going to be unhauling it. The next book that I read was actually a hit for me, and that is Alat's Away by Darcy Little Badger. This is a very strange world, but I really enjoyed and was fascinated by the take that Darcy Little Badger took on this story. So you're told at the beginning to imagine a world where it's just slightly different than the world that we know today, because all of these fantastical things, they're actually real. Vampires are a real thing, like a curse that's like a disease that you can get and be afflicted by. She has a ghost dog, and it's normal that she's able to call forth ghosts and different people. Like, the fantastical is real in this world. It's just treated as normal, which, hey, I think is fantastic. It's really cool. So you have that sort of a mix there. Darcy Little Badger is also drawing on the mythology and the folklore of her people as well, which I'm not going to say one for sure because I don't remember what it is, and I've been reading the other book that was about the Muskogee. So I know it's not Muskogee, but I don't remember which one it is. In this, Elatsaway is 17. At the beginning of the book, her older cousin, I think like 5-7 years older than her, he's married, he has a kid, doesn't live in the area, he dies. It's supposedly in a car accident, but she gets a dream visit from him where he says it was this other person who murdered me. And so she basically, this is like a fantastical paranormal murder mystery that also involves indigenous mythology. And it worked so well. There was some stuff in here that was just, it was so weird, but I just bought it. And the way that Darcy Little Badger wrote, I ate it up. And the relationships in here are so well done and so thoughtfully explored. And when it came to the final explanation for the bad guy, chef's kiss. So well done. Obviously, I'm not going to say any of those details because that would be spoilers, but this is definitely a hit. I think I ended up rating this 4.5 stars. Now, the book that I just finished, I can't tell you too much about because it is book 3 in this series, so I'm not going to tell you much. I did this so in Act 2, there are 3 encounters, and this was the 3rd of the encounters. Actually, no, yeah. I was going to stop and talk about the one that I read for the first of the encounters, but I'm not going to. So I actually read By the Fire We Carry is the 2nd of the encounters in Act 2. The last book that I'll talk about, I read as for the first one. Anyway, the prompt was wings on the cover. And so I'm like, okay, great. I can do it for this encounter, and I get 2 bonuses for it. Young adult and sequel, and it helps me finish a series. So I'll definitely take that. I don't know how she can keep writing so much. I really enjoyed my read. I will say, I think that some of the narratives got a little bit too split. We added too many in here. I don't think that we needed Elliot or Sparrow's perspectives. They were not in there that much. Yes, they talked about very important things. However, I think that could have been communicated differently, because when you have it so spread out, you have this massive book. But that doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy those sections. I think from the beginning of the series to where it ends, Nikki Palpretto definitely had to have a full scope. She has a very well imagined, fully thought out, built world. The relationships, the complexity of the relationships of Veronica and Val, Valkyra, are so well done. It's so complicated. The way that it ultimately resolved, was there a little bit of Deus Ex Machina at the very end? Yes. Am I going to begrudge any of that? No. I thought it was a very fitting end, and there was just so much going on. You got political machinations going on in here, and I love that. I think if I had to rank it, I do like the first one the best, but then it goes first, third, this one, and second. But they're all really well done, and I'm so glad that I have read this series. The other book that I read that I do not have a physical copy of, but I'm going to, is Challenger. That is Adam Higginbotham's latest publication. It's probably going to be on the Goodreads list for nonfiction. I'm not reading that particular genre. I have read his other very well-known work, Midnight in Chernobyl. Going into this, you gotta know it's going to be fairly dry for a lot of it, but he still tells it in an engaging way. And in this, obviously he's talking about the Challenger disaster, but he sets the story up by telling a brief overview of the space system leading up to that, with very pertinent points being pulled out and talked about that lead directly to all of the failings that finally come together, end up resulting in the Challenger disaster. When you get close to the point and he starts talking about the people who were on that shuttle, and he starts talking about their different goals, it pulls on your heartstrings. Even though he's not waxing eloquent about anything, I think it is a very comprehensive, well put together documentary style work. It's a lot. It's not going to be for everybody. It is fairly dry, but I think it was well done. And I think, if I remember correctly, I gave that 4 stars. There are all of the books that I read for these past few weeks. I don't even know, I don't have all of them because I read a lot on ebook. I definitely read a lot more than I would have had a hurricane not come through and completely up the lives for everybody in this area, and such devastation in Western North Carolina, which is so closely connected to us. I'm hoping that things will start going a little bit back to normal as time passes by, more recovery efforts are done. I constantly want to be in denial about what that's going to mean for when we go back to school. We'll see how that goes. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.